Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Agents to Owners podcast. With us today out of Miami, Florida, we have the business development lead at Lula, the tech company responsible for creating Gale, Mr. Roberto Salinas. Also joining us today, really just to help me translate some of this tech language that's going on, I have Miss Elise Umana, founder of Connection Insurance and somewhat of a specialist in the Gale program. Roberto, Elise, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Really excited to be here.
I'm excited too. This is becoming one of the hottest topics in the insurance industry. We're seeing it all over, our internet, posting sites, and so it's growing fast. It's a great program, Gail, I'm referring to, and so I'm looking forward to learning and our listeners learning more about it today. Before we get going, Roberto, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your experience in the insurance space?
Yeah, absolutely. At Lula, we started primarily as a solution provider for buyers of insurance, right? So, um, a few years ago, our founders saw that some businesses, small commercial businesses, had a tough time managing their insurance policies. So we ended up developing tools to help them not only manage those policies, but also to mitigate the risk associated with their business. Um, the perfect example of this was commercial auto, specifically small and medium sized car rental agencies. Um, why? Because if they have 10 vehicles, all of them worth different amounts, they needed different policies for those amounts. Now, let's say that they have a new employee. Well, now they need to contact each carrier or each, um, whoever issued those policies to add that as an official or a driver to those vehicles, right? So that ended up becoming a pain for them. Not to mention that their premiums were through the roof because rental agencies carry a lot of risk. So we developed tools to help those kind of businesses, and that grew really, really quickly, especially when we ended up actually becoming an insurance agency, a very tech-driven insurance agency to procure insurance for our customers. We went from around 100 customers to over 5,000 in the lapse of 18 months. So
Wow.
pretty explosive
Wow.
growth. Um, but that gave rise to what I like to call happy problems. And the happy problems are problems that you wouldn't have if you weren't doing something right.
Right.
So one of those happy problems was actually that we just didn't have enough people uh, that we worked with to help serve all of our customers. And sometimes it wasn't existing customers, even sometimes it was potentially referrals. We missed around 60,000 phone calls in
Wow.
the lapse of 18 months. So the opportunity
Wow.
cost was quite literally in the millions. Um, and we kept that up for around 3 years, and we found that we needed to make a change. We needed to find a solution to that problem. So my experience in insurance, or our experience in insurance, comes from really serving that underrepresented community of small, medium-sized car rental agencies primarily.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. So, I mean, you were, one of these agencies that found a niche market and it just blew up.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
realized it was
Extremely niche market, and it was just really good timing as well with the rise of like the gig economy, where a lot of people had, if somebody had two vehicles, they'd list them on Turo, and it's very hard to insure a vehicle when it's on Turo.
yeah.
So at one point, we were the largest insurer of Turo vehicles on the platform. So that kind of niche is where we really thrived.
Yeah. So you had this, you're missing out this on all this opportunity, and you figured, you have this problem. We got to figure this out. How are we going to, um, you know, attain
Yeah.
or handle all these calls?
Yeah. So what we saw is that um, we didn't want to outsource our work. We didn't want to outsource, uh, our customer support, but we also saw that it wasn't feasible to hire an additional 100 people
Right.
to constantly be on the phones. And at the same time, there was this big boom in the development of generative artificial intelligence. So we thought to ourselves, well, somebody out there is going to develop AI for insurance, and they are going to revolutionize basically how insurance is dealt with. And we said to ourselves, well, why can't that someone be us? Um, so we just happen to be very well positioned with the know-how of technology and insurance, which is not something that you commonly see.
No.
Um, and we said, well, we're in a perfect position to develop this ourselves. So we had our problem, which was we needed more people to reach our customers, and we had a potential solution. So we got to work on developing the concept of what is now Gale, which, by the way, Gale stands for Generative Artificial Intelligence by Lula. So it's just a short acronym that we came up with pretty much on the fly, and it's just kind of it's stuck, you know.
That's solid. I like it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So
Roberto, can I ask
yeah,
how you
yeah,
guys came up with Lula? Because or the name Lula, the
yeah.
brand.
So that's curious actually. So Lula, our founders, they wanted four-letter word, uh, two syllables that meant something special, and that's what they wanted to name their company. Um, Kind of like Uber, right? Um, Turo even is another good example. Uh,
Smart.
and Lula, I don't remember what the exact translation is, but it means like easy or convenient in I think it was Swahili or something of the sort. So in um, one African language, Lula means convenient or ease of use, and that's why we chose it. So
That's awesome.
yeah, no, that's a throwback right there.
what kind of time frame are we talking? How long ago was this? It wasn't terribly long ago, right? When you started creating this?
So the first version of the company, when Lula first became a thing, that was, I believe it was 2017 or 2018.
Okay.
Um, no, it was longer than that, 2016, I believe. So it's been like 8 years since the original concept of Lula came about, because the first idea was uh, car sharing, but for students on college campuses. Mm, So kind of like Turo, but for uh, students of university students. And that business was going great up until the pandemic hit, because who was going to share their vehicle then, and college campuses shut down, right? So that business dies, and that's where Lula 2.0 was born, which was the insurance related business. And the reason we chose insurance is because when they were running basically a car rental agency, uh, they found that 90% of their day-to-day operations were dealing with insurance. Um, so it all kind of ties back to the same uh, niche that we used to
Yeah.
work with, and now we've just expanded. And instead of serving buyers of insurance, we want to serve sellers of insurance, so the insurance agencies themselves.
So tell us how Gale works and what it does.
Sure. So for the what it does part, I'm actually going to leave that to Elise because she's somebody
Nice.
that's actually using it.
Thank you. Yeah.
But how it works is, so Gale is a conversational artificial intelligence. What that means is that it's able to interact with you just as we're interacting right now. Maybe not as eloquently as we might, but for most interactions, Gale is capable of performing them. So the way that it works is Gale will quite literally listen to what you're saying. It'll transcribe that into text. Then, using that piece of text, we will generate, hence the generative part of Gen AI, we will generate an additional portion of text, which will then be read out loud again by Gale. Now, those 4 steps take, on average, around 2 seconds between you stop speaking and then Gale starts speaking. All of that happens within 2 seconds. And we're constantly working on shortening that time to make it as realistic as possible. So that's the basis of how Gale works. And then what you do is that you provide scripts to it, which I will also let Elise touch on that, which is a general instruction or a general direction of what you want Gale to do depending on the inquiry of the customer. So basically, if you sum that all up and you compress it, Gale is like having quite literally digital AI as an employee. So, and then how you use it and how scripts work. Elise, I'll hand it off to you for that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I just learned recently that scripting is a form of like making a prompt like you would on ChatGPT. The more specific you are, the better the output is. And so with the scripting in Gale, it's basically just kind of like the way you would guide a new hire in your agency. You would show them, some phone etiquette, how you would, it has a greeting space built in, a phone call closing, and you pretty much just break down step by step what you want Gale to collect for different situations. So if it's like an auto quote, you would list out in the beginning, collect this basic information, and then, if you got to go into specifics for the auto quote, like VIN numbers, driver's license numbers, you specify all of that within the handbook, which is what answers the inbound calls. And so in our agency, we have it turned on 24/7. So even during business hours, we have it answering the phones, and we do that because Gale is able to transfer the calls where needed. And so if it's able to offset a call for us and the client's happy, then we feel like that's saving us time. And according to the Gale dashboard, it's saving us about 4 hours a week. So
Wow.
I would imagine it's going to be bigger than that once the Spanish rolls out, because we have a lot of Spanish speaking clients, and so Gale will transfer a lot of those calls. But I really appreciate that it even will tell the caller in Spanish, like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't speak English," and it'll sometimes even say it in Spanish, but I'm going to transfer you to Gabriela, and then it'll transfer the call to my VA. So yeah, Gale has definitely been a huge, time saver for us in that sense, because my VA, who's front facing, only speaks Spanish, so it's been able to really offset those English calls for her, the service related ones.
So what are all the way, and not all the ways, but a lot of the ways that we can use Gale, within an insurance agency? How are you? What are the ways that the different aspects that you're utilizing it?
Yeah, so I think it depends on what your primary pain points are, but I would say that right now the inbound calling is really useful. However, there are outbound scripts that you can make, and you can build that into your agency's Zoom automation so that it could follow up on leads, for example. Or if you have the agency Zoom service center, you can build it into call your pending cancellations. So you can pretty much make a script for anything. That's how customizable it is. You can really just tailor it to whatever you need it to do.
Yeah. So just to add on to that, it's really about how creative you can get with the use of Gale. We've seen a variety of different uses, even some that are so out of the box that we didn't even think of them when creating Gale. For example, we have one customer who also works with a very particular niche. They work with truckers. So they do a lot of trucking insurance. Now, as I'm sure you can probably imagine, truckers can have very colorful language when they're being called pretty much out of the blue. So the thing that Gale would do is that even when faced with this kind of um, you know language, it would stay very calm, very concise, very polite, which doesn't matter how upset you are, is extremely disarming. You don't want to continue to be mean and rude to a person. You want to be, oh, you know what, sorry, yeah, you're right. Didn't mean to yell, right? So this agent, listening to these calls, actually started to use Gale's responses and Gale's tonality to train his already existing producers to diffuse situations. He was saying like, hey, just hang in there for like 15, 20 seconds, be super polite, and 75% of the time, their tone is going to change as well. And they're going to end up the call saying, oh, thanks for your call. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Right. So that's one of the, like these use cases that really, or one of these creative things that our customers are finding. But when it comes to the specific capabilities of Gale and what it's actually capable of, um, pretty much, Elise uses it as basically a receptionist. So anything that a receptionist can do, as long as it's, digital, it can't, send a fax, but it can answer the phone and it can transfer those calls. And then it can also do outbound calls for both service and support, or, anything else that you would want it to do. So it's a very dynamic tool at the end of the day.
I also really like how customizable it is. Like you can program a specific use case for negative sentiment, which is kind of like what Roberto was just touching on. If somebody's calling in upset, if you want Gale to go even further, because its tone is always friendly. But if you wanted to say certain things like, oh, I'm so sorry, I apologize if you're upset, you can program it to handle negative sentiment towards AI, which is what I did for mine. If somebody's like, am I talking to an AI? Which most of the time people don't get upset. They're just kind of like amused by it. But if they are annoyed by it, I programmed it to kind of have a response for that as well. So it really is customizable to however you want Gale to respond in those situations.
Which, to touch on that now, I don't have Gale, but when I met with Roberto last week, and he kind of gave me a sample of it, I knew that I was speaking to a tool like that, but it sounded really real. Like, yeah. I don't know that I would have known had I just, called his office and I was speaking to this person. That's how real it sounded.
So, Elise, I'm actually curious. What did you name your version of Gale?
I've changed its name so many times just because I like experimenting with it. But right now I have it named Sandra because I just switched to the Dakota voice.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been getting a lot of good reception to that voice. Before that, I was using Jerry, which I really enjoyed as well. That's a male voice. But I think something about a female voice, and maybe there's been studies on this, I don't know, but I think people tend to be a little bit more receptive to female voices, I've noticed.
So for those that are confused about the names that we just said, those are different, let's say, personas that we've given to Gale. And each one of those personas is a different voice with a different accent and kind of a different personality that you can select. And then the reason that I asked Elise what the name of her AI is right now is because I've heard of people calling back to an agency and then asking for like Alex. They're like, oh, we don't have an Alex that works here. And then they're like, oh man, it's actually the AI. So they're like, they fully thought that Alex in this case was an employee at that agency. So I was curious, has something like that happened to you already, Elise?
They haven't named it by name, which is so cool, but they have come in before and said, "Hey, I was talking to a girl over the phone, and they were
Yeah.
talking about Dakota, the voice." And they'll tell me like, "Yeah, I was talking to her earlier. Was that you?" I'm like, "No, that wasn't me." So it's interesting to see. Yeah, I think sometimes people really genuinely don't even pick up on any type of artificial voice in the
Yeah.
calls.
So, Elise,
That's right.
other
Very cool.
than
But
you said it saves you 4 hours a week. What would you say the benefits have been so far with you using this tool?
mhm. Yeah, so and I mean in my case, which is very specific, my before I had Gale and before I joined the test users, I had my VA answering all the calls. And she would try her best in English, but she's just not fully proficient in English. And so it's really helped her because now she's more of a quality control analyst for Gale. So her role has been repurposed from answering the phones to kind of just doing the follow up on the back end for Gale. And so it's really helped her, and it's really helped our clientele in the sense of like it's a consistent experience every time
Yeah.
every time the phone's picked up, it's a consistent experience. Like even right now, I have emails coming in that Gil's taking calls, but I know my VA is monitoring those. And so it's just nice to know that, before, if it was a call where she just absolutely couldn't handle it, it would eventually have to get transferred to me, and that would interrupt my day. And
Yeah.
so it's just really nice to know that Gil's handling those calls according to how I instructed it to, and it's going to be consistent every single time because it's artificial intelligence, and so it's going to follow those instructions the same way every single time. So that's
So,
what's really been game changer for us.
so just to kind of circle back on that, because you just made me think of something. So in the Gale dashboard, we have you can track usage of Gale, so you can see how much you're using it. And at least you mentioned that right now it says that it's saving you around 4 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what I'm starting to think is that's not that it's actually saving you 4 hours a week, is that it now takes only 4 hours of Gale's usage to solve what would have, uh, you know, as you just described, been your EA trying to help that customer, being a little bit out of her depth with maybe the language barrier, then having to transfer to you, which then interrupts your day, which then
Yeah.
pushes back your deliverables. So it kind of like this chain that probably at the end of the day equates to maybe even more than 4 hours.
Yes, I agree. I think that the reason why it's probably that number too is just because we have a lot of Spanish callers, and so they end up getting transferred to her. But I can
Mhm.
only imagine what that's going to look like once that Spanish gets turned on for us. And
No, it's gonna.
I've worked with a few other agencies that they don't have Spanish speaking clientele for the most part, and they're saving more time than I am with Gale. So, and I'm also a scratch agency, so my call volumes aren't going to be as much as like a larger
Yeah.
agency.
Yeah.
Well, think about, yeah, I agree. I think that it saves you as the business owner probably a lot more time, because you're not handling those, especially if you can direct those. Let's say somebody's just calling for, maybe it's just a simple billing, question, which, we don't take any payments here in our office. So something that I would use it for is direct those calls right to Progressive or Travelers or whoever it was to do that. My staff doesn't have to touch it, or
Yeah.
maybe if
No,
it's
I
a third party that's calling in for a claim, what we usually do in that situation is we direct them to the company. So it's another way to route those without one of my people even touching it.
yeah, it's a
So
really good traffic control is what I tell
yeah,
people. Like a traffic control, like okay, this call needs to go here, here, and then the agencies that do like to take payments over the phone, you can program it to do that. Like transfer to either a human team member, and with the integrations that I know Lula has kind of in the works, it's only going to be able to do more as time goes on. So it's really exciting to see, what all it's capable of and how much it can save you time in that sense.
it would save our office a ton of time because we don't have a receptionist. So we kind of rotate the initial phone intake. This could handle that, and it could route it to the correct person. Again, and a lot of times, we have a number of outside agents, which we end up just transferring calls, just to not have one of my team members interrupted, transferred, figure out who it is. If Gail can do that, that would save my office a ton of time.
So it sounds like we need to talk after the podcast.
We do. I was frankly, I was blown away when you and I got together. And as I told Elise this before, I have a process for any new shiny object that comes along, where I only do one thing at a time, and I don't jump on something until I have a process in place and I'm ready to fully implement it. So that's initially, when I kept hearing Gail's name and seeing it and seeing posts, I really didn't pay much attention to it because I knew that I wasn't going to do anything with it. I connected with Roberto here to talk about the podcast, and he just kind of we talked about it more, and the more interested I got, and then he gave me a little taste of it. I was blown away, absolutely blown away. And then my mind just started racing on all the capabilities that we could use it for: initial phone intake, after hours to direct people. And again, I know you mentioned that's how a lot of agencies use it, is for an after hours. Well, if we don't have to touch those and they get directed to the right place, the customer's happy, it saves us time. It's endless. I know I could use it for our outbound, call follow-ups. We could use it for our monthly renewal calls to our customers, just to initiate it. And to me, it would just be a matter of, let's initiate this conversation, maybe set up an appointment, and then get it over to one of our team members to kind of take it from there. But like you said, it's a perfect traffic control person. I love it. I'm definitely interested.
And I think that there's some agencies that have very unique needs when it comes to call routing. So they don't necessarily want to set up a call tree, because some people could say, well, you could set up a call tree. People appreciate being able to call somewhere and somebody picks up the phone. I think a lot of people don't really like the experience of getting routed through a call menu.
No.
And so I think that it's better in that sense. But also I've talked to some agencies that have affiliate agencies beneath them, and they all service their own individual clients. And so Gale would really be able to kind of transfer those calls where needed, based upon the conditional logic that's set up in that person's transfer hub, which is what Gale uses to kind of have the knowledge of where to transfer calls. So
yeah, to your point on a call tree, how many of us, we only get more ticked off the longer we are in this this phone tree.
I mean, I know I'll press 0 like 5 times.
Same here.
And forget it if I get to a voicemail, I'll just hang up.
I think that's a good, something just came to my mind, is there an easy out like that with Gale? When someone says representative, does that automatically send them over to the next person?
Yeah, I mean, you could build it. You could build it into the script. It's that easy. If you start hearing that a lot of people are saying representative, just it's as easy as saying or telling Gale, if you hear that word, transfer to the sales department, right?
That's
or
what I like about it.
Support department. We don't force you to go through Gale if you don't want to. It's just about building it out in there. Which might seem overwhelming at first, but once you really get the hang of it, it's pretty straightforward, and it's so flexible that I even recommend people have fun with it. Anytime that I talk to a customer and they just started using Gale, I say it doesn't only need to be in you can basically you can create any kind of customer experience that you want.
Yeah, so for mine, Brad, I actually like that you bring that up, because in my experience, the reason why people say that is because they're so used to the traditional AI that's in phones nowadays, where it's not generative AI, so it doesn't understand context, and it'll say, I'm sorry, I picked up background noise, can you repeat that again? Everyone gets frustrated with that type of AI. And so the way I have my Gale programmed is when somebody says that, it'll kind of try and give them an objection for it. Like, oh, I'm a really smart AI. Are you sure I can help you with a lot? And I can help you with, faster than a team member probably could. And I would say 7 times out of 10, people would be like, okay, yeah. Then they're receptive to talking to it. And then other times they'll just say no, in which case it'll just transfer to a live team member. So I think that that's totally up to the agency owner, how,
Yeah.
they want Gale to respond to that. But for me, I at least want to have them.
Oh, looks like we might have lost her there.
Might have lost Elise for a second.
There, yeah. Yeah. I would just want them to have give Gale a chance where possible.
Yeah, and to your point, the way I see it, so none of these programs come out of the box how you want them. You have to build them out to some degree. So if you are purchasing, that's any tool, that's Agency Zoom, that's anything, that's Gale. You have to build it how you want. And something that's unique, Elise has jumped in with both feet on this tool from the very beginning, and if you've spent any time with Elise or followed her all, you see that she is on it with things. She has great ideas. She develops things. So you, like I mentioned, you've kind of become a specialist in this. So Elise, why don't you tell us a little bit about your new venture? What you've kind of partnered with Gale to help agents develop this program.
Yeah, so I think some people in general, sometimes with prompting, they get kind of, frozen up, kind of like with like you just mentioned, Agency Zoom with the automation. I think anybody can set up Gale, honestly, but I think that some people really just prefer to have that already done for them. And with me being in the space and being an agency owner, I kind of understand the nuances behind how different everybody's processes look like and systems and processes. And so where I kind of come in is I offer to just help those that are looking for somebody to just do it for them, and they don't really want to take the time to do it themselves. And so, yeah, that's basically what I'm offering right now. And I'm also even offering some scripting for Dalpad because, I know you were looking into Dalpad, but Dalpad has some AI capabilities too. And so I think that that's something that some people just look for, just, a service where they could have their scripts built out for them and then not really have to think about it too much. And I'm really proud to be partnered with Gale because, Lula, they're awesome. And so, and I know that was kind of a little bit of a pain point for them with some of their clients just asking for more help with the scripting. So
yeah, because the thing is, we're not a very large team at Lula, and we're starting to run into the exact same issue that we had before with our agencies, right? That a lot of our current customers for Gale, they want this additional help. This kind of to teach them to get past that learning curve where they're self-sufficient with Gale. And Elise has been tremendously helpful with that. It's been awesome. Like we're really happy that she really embraced it and took the time to learn it. And we had a webinar with her last week, and it was one of our most attended events that we've had, just because everybody wanted to hear, how she cracked that code.
Yeah, Elise, what's the name of your consulting business here?
It's called Agency Scripture, and it's on Facebook. If you look me up on Facebook, it's on there, or if you just look it up, Agency Scripture. The website's also agencyscripture.com, so I have some information on there if anybody's interested in booking a Zoom call. But yeah, this is a relatively new thing, and I just started it this month. So. So I'm excited for that.
Which, from what I understand, your calendar is basically already full. Because there's a demand. You want to use this awesome program
Yeah.
And I mentioned before, we can be kind of an impatient bunch. And so we want it done, right now. And it just makes sense to connect with somebody that knows what they're doing, so you can use all the benefit that this tool provides.
And kind of like you said too, Brad, like not only do we all, like us as independent agents, do we kind of want it already ready, we also want it done differently.
Yeah,
So, I think that sometimes we do frustrate vendors in that sense, like sometimes perhaps, with how different everybody wants it. And
yeah,
so I really appreciate that about how Gale was built out with that in mind, with full customization in mind, because that
yeah.
makes things very easy.
What I like about this is that, so you can get it started, and then you could just keep tweaking it and tweaking it and
Yeah.
tweaking it, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I
Yep.
think as most tech companies, they're going to continue to build and improve and enhance. Roberto, why don't you touch on some of the enhancements that you've already made and the improvements you've already made, and maybe what, some of the vision and where you see this product going?
So the product is already much more refined than it was when we first launched. Elise can attest to that. She was one of our early customers. Um, and some of the things that we're working on right now can be divided into two categories. It's either functionality or quality of life. Functionality simply means um, adding different ways to interact with Gale, whether that be the Spanish version, which we're really really excited about. I'm hoping that that comes out this week. It's basically going to be a version of Gale that can not only speak to you in English and Spanish, but it can also do kind of like a Spanglish hybrid, which is going to be really really cool. We have it in some of our test accounts here. It's awesome. So that goes into that kind of like functionality bucket, right? And then there's a quality of life bucket, which, circling back to something that I said earlier, is reducing that time, what we call time to intelligent response, from 2 seconds down to 1.8 seconds, down to 1.5 seconds, to make it as realistic, as quick and efficient as possible. Another thing is, uh, you know, having Gale, the way that it speaks, be more consistent with what the customer needs. What I mean by that, if somebody says like, "Oh, can you repeat that but a little slowly?" Have Gale repeat that, but actually a little slower, right? Um, so the, we're working on both ends, and the cool thing is that we not only do we push updates almost on a weekly basis, but we publish everything that we're working on pretty much live. So you can see what we're working on that week, so that you can look forward to what are the changes that I'm going to see for next week, right?
And I
And do
think
you?
that that's, oh, I'm sorry, Brad,
No,
you
no,
go ahead.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think that we appreciate that a lot because in our industry, tech is really, can tend to be slow to innovate. And I did see that feature where you see a live pipeline of what they're working on.
Mm,
And I just thought that was so crazy. And any user can go in and submit a feature request. So if there's a feature that you think would be a good feature for Lula to add, they have this thing where, or a feature where you can go in and request it and somebody will actually respond to you. So that's
mm.
just amazing to me as somebody who deals with a lot of tech. I don't think seen that. It's not very common.
No,
So
not to you see the innovation that quickly,
exactly.
and that you're listening. Um, but yeah, that's awesome. What areas do you think the tool can be improved on?
There's several. I mean, I don't think we'll ever get to a version of Gale that's 100% complete.
Right.
Like it's always going to continue to improve, even if we're just tinkering very small things. What we could improve on, in my personal opinion, is transfers. So why is that? Because there's a certain level of guesswork that needs, and what do I mean by guesswork? I'll break that down in a sec, but that needs to be done to know uh, where to transfer certain calls. So to your example, Brad, if somebody hears Gale and says representative, representative, well, Gale still doesn't know, is this a new sale? Is this customer support name? Who do I transfer that to? Right? Um, and if somebody says like, yeah, I have this new vehicle, and I want to add it to my policy, well, Gale can see that as either support or sales because they have an existing policy. So are they, just doing an endorsement to that policy, or is it a new sale that needs to happen? So that kind of like, let's say, fuzzy gray area of who needs to receive that call, that's something that I believe we need to continue to enhance to not make it gray, but make it, or at least make that gray area slimmer and less ambiguous, right?
Yeah. But in reality, we we deal with that today with people answering the phone.
Yeah.
I mean, where it gets transferred, really gets transferred to the wrong person. And maybe that's, oftentimes because a lot of the people that call in, well, they don't communicate all that well.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's
Yeah.
sometimes it's because people don't know what they want
Yeah.
or aren't communicating very well.
Yeah.
So it's up to us to, and that's why I said guesswork. We need to guess where these people are want to go, or what
Yeah.
their needs are. So that's something that we're working on very hard, but there's always going to be a margin of error there. We
Yeah.
won't be able to guess 100% every single time.
Yeah. Does it have the capability? One of the things how we operate, here is that we have an incoming call. We find out who that person is that's calling. If it's an existing customer, we use Hawksoft as our management system. We look on Hawksoft to find out, oh, this is Joe's client. We're going to transfer it over to Joe. Does Gale have the ability to read a management system and then transfer, to that person? Or would they actually have to say, I need to speak to Joe before I transfer it there?
So, as it stands right now, they need to say, I need to speak to Joe before it transfers to Joe, right?
Yeah.
But we are working on integrating with pretty much all of the existing uh, systems that agencies use on a day-to-day basis today. So we already have a live integration with Agency Zoom. Uh, where we have a pretty good relationship with Hawksoft, a pretty good relationship with the other companies that agents work with, because at the end of the day, even though we put a bunch of effort into making our portal very pretty, we don't want you to have to learn a new piece of software to be able to operate it efficiently. And this is aside from like the agency principal or the IT director for that agency if they're larger. Like I don't want Elise's employees to have to learn how to use Gale all over again because they've probably spent a couple months learning how to use Agency Zoom or learning how to use Hawksoft. So why give them that additional headache of learn a new system? And that's why we also believe that integrations are so crucial to the
Yeah.
experience, to your experience as an agent with Gale. And you know, as a cherry on the cake, it's also improves the experience for the end customer.
Yeah. Uh, any visions of extending to different verticals outside the insurance space?
So we haven't really like talked about it much, just because there's so much in insurance to do
Yeah.
still. So our initial uh, market is PNC,
Yeah.
and there's health and life, and then there's you know so much more that we can do within this same industry, which is insurance. Crazy thing to think about is in the insurance industry is now the largest industry in the world. I think it's like a $6 trillion industry annually. Um, Not only that, but nothing, at least in the US, nothing works without having an insurance. Like no other business can operate without having some kind of risk mitigation tool,
Yeah.
which insurance agents specifically distribute around, I think it's like 80 to 85% of all policies held in the United States. So there's so much that we haven't even had time to think about other verticals, right?
Yeah. Elise, what would you like to see added to Gale, or what do you feel might be missing, or you wish you could use?
Yeah, I think anything that I could suggest is probably things they already have in the works. Like the integration, like you said, Brad, is so helpful in the sense of like if Gale can get to the point where it can go into our AMS, which is where most of the detailed information is stored, it really, really adds value in that sense. Because it can read off policy details, and the CRMs have some information, but it's not nearly as detailed as the AMS. And so, but I think the fact that it connects with agency Zoom already is so helpful,
Yep.
and it makes
Yeah.
notes on that client's
Yeah.
files.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
Create like a record of that touch point in the
Really?
Yeah,
client
that's
file,
amazing.
Wow. This last question is for either of you, or you both can answer. For agents that are considering taking on Gale, or maybe just for agents that are just getting used to it, what kind of advice would you like to give them? What things should they consider?
So, if you're considering looking for Gale or getting a Gale license, well, first off, I did create a discount code for those that stuck through the podcast. At checkout, just use AOT123 and you'll get 50% off your
Wow.
first month of usage. But for those that are curious or thinking about it and how you might be able to get started, I'd say look at book a demo with one of our agents. They're really good at showing how Gale can be used. We do give you a complimentary onboarding after you sign up, and then don't dive off the deep end from day one. So at least you've been with Gale now for like a couple of months.
Yeah.
So and you now feel comfortable with it answering, all of your inbound calls. But that's
Yes.
because you learned about Gale for like you went through that learning curve. So don't go
Yeah.
into it expecting to have Gale answer every single one of your calls. Instead, choose like very specific use cases. After hours and on the weekends is the perfect
Yeah.
example. Very specific use cases so that you get comfortable with the technology before you deploy it throughout your entire agency. That would be my number one piece of advice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think I would also just add, like, don't be afraid to turn it on, even if it is just for overflow and after hours. Um, because it doesn't have to be 100% set up. You can, like Roberto just said, set up a couple use cases, test it out, and then see how it goes from there and adjust and tweak as you go, I guess. Because that's how I started out, was after hours overflow. And then as I tweaked it, eventually I got comfortable to just turn it on 24/7.
Exactly. So that process is exactly how I recommend people
Yeah.
go through the flow.
Lisa, I think you mentioned too, in a previous conversation, it's you really need to have somebody monitor, how
Yes.
this works, right? And that's going to give you
Yes.
comfort that it's working properly, and then that'll help you tweak it from there, right?
Exactly right. Like I have a dedicated VA to just monitoring Gale. So she'll get a Teams notification every time the call ends, and she'll go in and see and make sure that quality control, everything went well. Because there are occasional hiccups here and there. Sometimes maybe Gale will go quiet, or maybe the caller hung up, which now it tells you on there, caller resolution, caller hung up, or Gale transferred. So that's really useful. And if the caller hung up, well, she can go in and immediately call them and say, hey, I saw you were trying to add a car. Let's go ahead and complete that. Or, whatever the call purpose was, she'll go in and do the follow up. So I think that it's important to make sure that you still have maybe a VA dedicated to just ensuring that quality control.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Elise, would you say that at least for those initial calls, like you could handle them. You know, when it was after hours or overflow, like you
Oh
would
yeah.
just go in and then check how that customer experience was, because I feel like
Yes.
that's also a really important part of learning about the product, right?
Yeah, I think in the beginning it really was, and I still go in there and monitor them myself too. Like I'll go in and just like, peek at
Yeah.
them, and she'll tell me if something was off with the scripting that I could maybe adjust. Um, but yeah, I think that in the beginning it was definitely still me going in there and really trying to adjust talk paths, or, the order in which Gail was collecting information for certain things. And then also I have my Gail scripted to say things like, oh, can we text you a copy of your insurance card? Now, Gale doesn't have SMS capabilities yet, but my VA goes on the back end and sends that text. And so, as far as the caller's concerned, Gale sent them it, or the caller that they were talking to.
Yeah.
So they don't know any different on the other line. It's just kind of
Yeah.
some manual work on the back end.
I think it's quite possible a lot of the time the customer doesn't know that they're speaking to an AI tool. Is that accurate, would you say?
Yeah, I think it depends, because if you're talking about my agency and my clientele, it's been rare when some people have thought it was real the whole time. Like maybe they'll think
Okay.
it's real in the beginning, and then they'll pick up later on that it was AI.
Yeah.
But I've seen other agencies that I've helped set up their Gale, when they're using that Southern dialect and they're in a region where Southern dialects are very common, people don't know it's AI. Like they are genuinely in disbelief, because I don't think that's a very common thing, to hear an AI that does have a Southern dialect. And there was one caller that was just in disbelief. He was like, "You're pulling my leg." He's like, "There's no way he's like, you're a robot, you're an AI." And so I think it depends on the voice you're using and the
Yeah.
region you're in.
Yeah.
And I think once that Spanish Gale rolls out, I guarantee you my clients are going to be like thinking it's a real person too. So
All right. Very last question, I promise.
No worries.
How often would you say you have to do damage control? I mean,
yeah,
because like I was speaking, none of these programs is going to be perfect. Automation is not
yeah,
going to be perfect.
yeah.
And so how often are you guys, seeing that something goes a little sideways?
It's becoming less frequent, just because anytime a client throws a curveball that I didn't put in the scripts, I will go in and add it immediately. Like if they ask a question that I hadn't programmed Gale to think of, or, like a specific use case. So they're becoming less frequent, but in terms of like technical things, like maybe Gale going quiet, it is becoming less frequent. And, if that is happening on the Gale Facebook group, people tend to kind of voice that, or like let Lula know, like, hey, I think we're having some issues here. And then, Lula will update and say, oh yeah, there was an outage, for a couple hours, it should be back up. So it's kind of things like that. But I would say out of every like 10 calls, if I had to ballpark it, probably like 8 of them are fine. And then 2 here and there, Gil will go quiet, or, maybe it'll confuse what the client was asking for. And so then the VA will just go in and do the follow up on it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Roberto, anything to add on that? Okay.
No, nothing at all. I think that's pretty accurate. All I'd like to say to finish off is if you're curious about it, just go to lula.com. We have a call recording that you can listen to on our website. You can book a demo right there, or if you're pretty much sold, you can just create an account right on the website. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got.
In case they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to
So
reach you?
the best way I'd say right now is definitely through Facebook as well. We've created this Facebook community called Gale Community. If you join there, I'm very, very active. I'm one of the admins. And if you would like to send me an email, just email me to tito@lula.com. TITO@LULA.com.
And Elise, if someone is interested in working with you on your agency scripture, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
They could book a call on the website. It's just agencyscripture.com, and it'll show like the availability of the dates. or they could, if they just want to talk to me one-on-one, my LinkedIn is Elise Umana, and then my Facebook is also Elise Umana, and I'm really active on all the Facebook groups, so they can also
Yeah,
find
you're
me
not hard
there.
to find. Yeah.
Yeah.
Both of you, again, this is an awesome conversation. Thank you very much for being here. I greatly appreciate it. I think this is something that's blowing up. So, Roberto, great job. This is incredible. I think it's something that this industry sorely needs. So,
Thank you.
Everyone else, thank you for listening to another episode of the Agents to Owners podcast. We'll see you next week.
All right. Bye-bye.